Great. Thanks so much for being here. It feels good to be back in Nebraska. Neil said that I did mention it was a little, it felt cold here. I think it's the wind. It was actually 20 degrees in Alaska when I left, and I wasn't wearing a jacket, and I got here and it was 30, and I thought I was going to freeze. So I'm going to read a short section from the beginning of the book, Bicycling Beyond the Divide. This is prologue. Oh, before I start, I want to make sure I thank Neil for inviting me up here. Thank you very much. And Jim Reese for encouraging this as well, two of my favorite poets. I'm thrilled to be on the stage with Jim and to be here with Neil. I'm a big fan of poetry. I don't know, when I was a boy, it was baseball cards, and then I grew up and it was girls I was obsessed with, and now it's poets. So I guess that's progress, huh? Prologue. May 1985, Wyoming Highway 191. The pronghorn was running beside me. I glanced over at him, saw the thin brown mane of his neck, the black patch on his cheek. In the large brown eyes, I expected to see panic, but what I saw was determination instead, and muscles churning beneath the tan and white skin. We raced beneath an overcast sky on a road that ran through rust-colored hills covered with yucca and sage. Side by side we moved, and I could hear the hum of my tires rolling over the pavement shoulder, the rush of the antelope's hooves on the sandy soil at the edge of the road, my cat-eye cyclometer showing a speed of nearly 35 miles per hour. As we moved together, miles of highway stretching out and not a car in sight. I'd first seen the antelope moments before, standing by the side of the road. It's hard to imagine what he must have thought when he looked up and saw me, just yards away, pedaling silently on my bicycle. But he lifted his head, stiffened, and watched just long enough to determine that whatever was the vehicle, there was a human attached. And then he jumped into forward position and was off. There was a barbed wire fence to the right of the road, and at first he had moved toward it, but in the frantic stride of his sprint, didn't jump and moved back toward the shoulder. He was galloping now as I rode beside him, and I could hear him, clouds of the Wyoming dirt rising around his feet. I'd been riding 3 hours since leaving Rock Springs early that morning without encountering another living being, save for the occasional pickup or RV, and I pedaled furiously, determined to keep up. And it seems to me now, as I remember it, that we rode and ran together throughout the morning, but in reality it must have been just seconds. Finally, unable to maintain the sprint, I slowed to a stop, and breathing heavily where I stood, straddling the bike, I watched as the antelope veered right, slipped beneath the fence, and disappeared over a distant rise. Then, re-emerging on a farther hill, he stopped, and I saw him standing, watching. It was the summer of 1985. Ronald Reagan was in his second term. The Los Angeles Lakers, led by Magic and Kareem, were on their way to their third championship in 6 years. A music festival called Live Aid played to audiences around the world in order to raise money for starving children. It was a time of optimism. I was 20. It's winter now as I write this, and nearly 20 years have passed since I rode beside that antelope. I sit in my small writing studio in Walton, Nebraska, and look at an old photo, at the lean legs that straddle the Trek touring bicycle, the still unused tent and sleeping bag strapped to the rear rack, fully packed panniers draped over each tire. That picture was taken by my mother, and I remember the moment after she snapped it, how we had each stood, not knowing what else to say, and then she hugged me goodbye. I lifted the bike and in small stuttered steps turned and pointed it toward the street. With the tires wobbling under the weight of my gear, I pedaled off the curb and rode south to the end of Crown Ridge Drive, before finally turning right and heading west on a journey that would take me through the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Alberta, and Idaho, across Washington, into Vancouver, Canada, before returning south down the coast through Oregon, half of California, and east across Nevada, Utah, Arizona, one tire carefully set into New Mexico at the Four Corners, because I wanted to tell people that I hadn't been there, but my bicycle had. And finally, a 5-day push back to Colorado Springs, where a small group of friends, family, and neighbors had gathered on the front lawn to welcome me home. The journals from that trip are old now, the page is worn and yellowed. I take the first and gingerly turn over the cover, which has long been torn from its binding. It contains daily entries, scribblings of mileage, average speed, distance, and day-to-day life bicycling solo over back western roads. Stuck within those pages are various business cards and brochures, information on campgrounds and motels, and an old note left on the seat of my bicycle by my older brother David on the morning I left. "Keep your eyes on the road and your nose off the pavement," it said. It was a mandate I had mostly managed to adhere to. What endures also are fragments of memory, pieces that no longer flow together as a whole, but remain scattered like a puzzle once put together, now strewn about. A rattlesnake on a desert highway, a drenching hailstorm, a small town Montana bar in the rain, a Navajo man named Daryl, a night of fireworks on an Oregon beach, an elderly couple in Raymond, Washington who took me in and fed me. I remember turtling across Highway 95, Nevada's most desolate highway. The winds, rebelling in true Nevada fashion, had reversed their usual westerly flow, and for 3 days I'd averaged a measly 6 miles per hour, while bomber planes from a nearby military range flew overhead. In Yellowstone, I woke among a herd of elk. In Waterton, Alberta, to a pair of mountain goats licking the salt from my gloves. In Sequim, Washington, I woke to a bag of donuts left by a teenage girl whose mother had invited me to sleep in her family's yard, but whose father had taken one look at me and said, "Don't even think of coming into this house." Consider him that 20-year-old boy, and knowing who I was then, I can only think of myself as anything. I cannot think of myself as anything but a boy. Naive, sheltered, painfully shy. In the year that preceded the summer, I'd quit my second college and moved back in with my parents. I was working at a downtown soda fountain called Michelle's. 2 nights a week, I cleaned an office building. I opened the junior high gym for the park and rec department. 3 part-time dead-end jobs. My father wanted me to go back to school. I drank beer instead. I had a girlfriend, Cynthia. We spent evenings drinking coffee, taking walks around Broadmoor Lake, parking in the Garden of the Gods. She told me her life goals, none of which seemed to include me. I felt an anxiety I didn't understand, a longing for something I couldn't define. So I did what countless other lost young men have done in this country. I headed west. Think of the changes of the last 20 years have wrought. In 1985, there were no cell phones or even phone cards. A call home required a pocket full of quarters or a voice on the other end willing to accept a collect call. There were no ATM machines. Money had to be wired or taken as an advance on a credit card during normal banking hours. Computer use then required an understanding of foreign languages, today more outdated than Latin, Fortran, BASIC, and COBOL. Much has changed in the West. Major urban areas are sprawling. Recent years have seen drought conditions and a rise in fires. There are increasing tensions between states and communities over water rights, and legal battles between state and federal government agencies over where to store nuclear waste. Immigration across the southern border has emerged as one of the most hotly contested political issues. In the West, where capital is still tied to land, ideological battles rage on between conservationists and economic development. Worldwide tensions are mounting, and the United States is embroiled in a war that feels like it will never end. Ronald Reagan has passed away. Magic Johnson has become the face, albeit still smiling and vibrant, of a devastating disease. World hunger and poverty have not diminished. As for me, I'm no longer skinny, not so naive. My blood pressure's high, and I recently broke my hand after slipping and falling on ice. I spend most of my time working and studying in an academic building called Andrews Hall, in an office with no windows. Beer is more condiment than meal now. Exercise is a walk from my office to the library. Cynthia is a pleasant, nostalgic memory. I schedule an appointment walk across campus to the University Health Center. I'm breathing heavily by the time I get there. "The first thing," says the nurse, jotting a number down on her chart as I'm standing on a scale, "we have to do something about the weight problem." Weight problem. The number one piece of evidence I'm no longer the kid I was then. That first trip was not only 20 years, but also 70 pounds ago. "Of course, I'm wearing shoes," I say. "Whatever makes you feel better," she says. I sigh. I once ran the Pikes Peak Marathon. Now I have to stop to rest after climbing a flight of stairs. I've fallen increasingly into a life that moves me away not only from good health, but also from relationship with the land of the West. the day-to-day connection of a life lived outside and physical exertion among the elements. What I fear now is that all I learned on that journey is lost. I'm a different person now, thank God, but I want to feel the road beneath my tires again. I want to apply what I've learned in the last 20 years to the journey, and I want to apply the journey to the next phase of my life. In February, I will turn 40. My longing for the West has never diminished. To think of that summer on the bicycle is to dream myself home, and home is an endless space, a roof of big sky, a bed of dry earth. I've decided to retrace that route, to write it again. I work at convincing myself that in some ways it'll be easier now. I know more, can better take care of myself. I'm banking on wisdom to make up for the lard. Do you think I can do this? I ask the nurse. She looks down at her chart. I think you better do something, she says. I walk down the creaky steps into the dank and dusty cellar, the smell of cold dirt, the soft hiss of the furnace. The old bicycle leans at an angle against the concrete wall. The tires are flat, the leather of the seat rippled and torn, the handlebar tape unraveled. How long has it been since I've ridden the bike? I can't remember. 15 years maybe. I carry the bike into the yard, lean it against a tree. I fill a bucket with soapy water and an old rag and start to clean, embarrassed by my neglect. I purchased this bike in 1984. It's a Trek 520. It has old school caliper brakes. The gear shift levers are on the down tube of the frame, and shifting is made by feel rather than by clicking into place. The bike was made specifically for touring, which means its longer wheelbase covers more ground per pedal rotation than a mountain or racing bike. Riding this bicycle after riding a mountain bike is something like the difference between driving a Cadillac and a Jeep. Right now, though, it's like a caddy on blocks. But I didn't even consider buying a new one. A good bicycle, even when neglected, will last a lifetime. But the bike needs work, quality work, and probably parts that are no longer made. So I call my neighbor Tony. Tony Kester is one of those I know a guy kind of guys. You need something, anything in Nebraska. If Tony can't get it, he knows a guy who can. If there are 20-year-old bicycle parts anywhere in the state, I know he'll find them. Sure enough, just days later, Tony delivers the bike to my door. The tires and seat are a polish of black, the new chain sharp silver, the handlebar tape has been replaced. I ride the bike down the driveway and to the end of the gravel road. It rides smooth. The gears shift easily. I replace the old rusty rearview mirror and add a new cyclometer. A week before I'm ready to leave, I lean the bike against our elm tree and step back to admire it. The bicycle sparkles in the sun, good as new.
So you guys are stuck with us for another 40 minutes or so, 45. We're going to switch off and on a couple more times. And I appreciate you coming out. Daryl's travels reminds me of all the places that I've been going to lately. And every time, well, I was just in Texas a couple weeks ago, and everybody looked at me or my license and said, Nebraska. And I said, that was right before the game, and I was kind of cocky. And I said, that's right. But to top the cake, there was a guy in New York. He said, he goes, where are you from? And I was asking for directions. I was down in the East Village. And I said, Nebraska. And he said, don't you guys still ride around in a horse and buggy there? And I said, well, the recession and all, we had to sell the buggy, but we kept the horse. So this is Nebraska. Pa said Bobby and me could go fishing down at Snake Creek just as soon as we graft this here calf and finish stacking round bales up in the loft of the barn. Pa said we could go play with the Indians down the road too, but Ma won't let us on account of man sits in tree, is still fixing to finish skinning a buffalo and make himself a new teepee today. So today, like most days, we'll likely watch them big airplanes blow by overhead. I wish people would just stop every now and again for a visit. I was fixing to go walk up the hill and pick some cherries, but Bobby got a tick up in his britches, stuck to his nutsack. Ma said maybe he was up there doing more than picking cherries and won't let none of us go up the hill no more. Ma predicts the Pony Express is due to arrive this week, And maybe Bobby and I can go sit at the end of the lane and wait for him and his horse. It's really nifty to see him race by and toss Bobby our stack of mail. And sometimes even, there's a Sears Roebuck catalog with girly pictures for us to look at in the outhouse. And maybe, just maybe, we could take the buggy to town and get us some candy, stare at all them city folk with their fancy hats and boots, and maybe, just maybe, we could take on a picture show while Bobby does his business around town. And maybe Loretta Swinson, maybe she'll be there in town too. Yes'm, yes'm, I do believe she's true. I used to collect glossy magazines as I grew up, and I had to give those away when I got married. But every once in a while I get a Victoria's Secret catalog in the mail. And the other day I got a jockey catalog in the mail, which I thought was odd, because I'd never seen a jockey catalog. This is called Jockeying for a Mate. The cover of the new jockey catalog captures a man and a woman wearing pajamas in a wheat field. I can't tell what county they're in, or what state. The clouds look familiar, but there's a lot of barbed wire and round bales here. And to be honest, I can't remember the last sea of wheat I've ever stood in. The guy is squinting like he might be staring down a doe, and the erect woman, she's not all that interested in him. She actually looks like she's got her eye on some other buck. He's got to be a little disappointed. I mean, really, what kind of guy chases a woman all the way out that far into the middle of a wheat field? You stare too long at the picture, and you see the guy has on a pair of jeans. The wheat is almost up to his waist. They're not fooling anyone. The woman is wearing a long-sleeved onesie, which is odd. At the end of the day, really, do we care more about the guy's legs or hers? If you think too long, you imagine the guy's on a gluten-free diet. Maybe he's allergic to wheat, would die to be on the cover, wants to save face. The next day I get the skinny. When I open the catalog, there they are, closer this time, at an old wooden kitchen table. Both have on new waffle thermals and are spoon-feeding each other cream of wheat. This is called Hank's Fruit House, and I haven't published it yet. I just wrote it the other day. Actually, it should be called Frank's Fruit House, but I think it closed down. I hope it did. This is from my friend Greg Kosmicki. We don't fill any job app out, just meet the day shift boss who, and I'm not kidding you, is straight out of movie Haggard, inhaling his cancer stick and blowing smoke right into Carlos Camacho's in my face, saying, "You're going to be here tomorrow at 7 in the morning?" Stepping all over his cigarette butt like that would teach us a lesson. Don't be late, is all we hear, and he turns the corner, and we aren't. We get here early and watch one of the guys swallow his girlfriend's tongue before he gets out of her car. Everyone else dragging their dead asses in for this 12-hour shift. Carlos is in the egg room. At break and the pisser, he's hacking out loogies in the sink, saying he's never seen so many hard-boiled eggs, has to breathe through his mouth as he cuts each one in half and hollows out the hard yolk. Screw this place. I'm gonna quit. It's making me sick. I said, "You can't quit. It ain't even lunch yet." And I head back to the salad room where I continue to rip the core out of heads of lettuce, hit it like it's some bitch's head, the toothless road apple room supervisor says. You know what girls are, don't you? Shit for brains. I continue to punch and rip, punch and rip, punch, rip, until the heads form their own mountain of green in the corner. Room supervisor is chain smoking and hosing down the pile of lettuce with a garden hose. Pre-washed, he says and smiles, spitting on the floor. One by one, the head is thrown into a grinder while women gather at the other end, bagging and tying, and here comes carrots from some other room. Boss man says, "Chef salad," spits again, and alls I know is I'm boxing up these bags of salad and taping them boxes shut until I can't get untangled, and I'm all a mess with brown packaging tape, and the guy tells me, "Get out," and I do. I walk by the egg room, holler to callers, "Fuck this place. watch him smile and throw his white gown and hairnet on the floor, and we are gone. We know we have one more year before we can never quit again. There's a new book that came out. What's it called? It's called Kicking Out the Jam, I think, or something. It's edited by M.L. Liebler, and it's got stuff by anyone from Bob Dylan and Eminem to. It's basically a book published it's from Coffee House Press, but it came out of Detroit, where M.L. Liebler is from. He's coming here next year, I know, to your college and up to my college. And it's about working poems and working essays and things like that. So I've been reading it, and I think that's where some of these new poems are coming from. This is called Knippelmeyer. Let me get this right. If you're anybody from Johnson County, Nebraska? Okay. Well, they have some good names down there. If you are a writer, sometimes you pick up phone books in hotels. They have names like Arm Connect, Dunakaki, Knippelmeyer is one. Knippelmeyer and Sons, we lay the best in town. My best friend's dad, the block layer, said, "Hold this jackhammer up for a minute, you skinny little pecker, and we'll let you come to the job site." The same father we looked hours for, who would turn to us as the sun shone into the entrance of the bar, wherever we were, Millard, North Omaha, Bellevue, begging for his money for smokes or beer, or worst case scenario, to tell him he had to go home. "You stupid dago wop, get a job, get your fat ass out of here and take your hippie friend." We wanted to be men, and we knew even then this wasn't the way to make a home. Searching Millard taverns for his beat up rig, stealing coins from his ashtray, we were wrong then too, saying we never found him, never saw a thing. All those manual jobs, busting ass to make a buck, so we could blow it on booze, breasts, and skateboards, where we'd tear up our bodies cess-sliding and launching off ramps onto concrete, trying to impress girls, winding up on our knees, praying to land our moves next time. All that language that molded us, all that language we wouldn't speak to others, all those words we took in and only dished back to each other. When it was late, when we tried to dream but couldn't turn off the voices, couldn't turn off the noise of a garbage disposal grinding credit cards, that go back to your room and go to bed, the sugar bowl against the wall, we made amends. We realized our families were just as unstable as the rest, and we say the wrong things in families of our own now. We scream too much, we push too much, we love too much, but we don't let go. I have a poem in my book here. If you don't have it, I'll be more than happy to show you some. About my mother-in-law, and I call her every once in a while the collector of all things whole and necessary. This ought to give you an idea about her. This is another poem called The Blues and Jeans. When I found the sewing needle in the crotch of my newly hemmed jeans, I was troubled. Not for the nutsack that had gone unharmed, but for my overall well-being. My mother-in-law, who had done the sewing, perhaps forgetful, perhaps not. An instinctive shriveling in the unhemmed crotch, rendering my jeans somewhat roomier than I had remembered. This is called Cattle Drive. I'm not sorry, but that's true. I found a needle in a blanket. I don't know who she is, like my great aunt sewed for my first daughter, and we put it in the crib, had it in the crib for a couple months, and then had a big sewing needle in it when I went to wash it for the second or third time. Anyway. This has nothing to do with that. This is called Cattle Drive. The trouble with semis in my neighborhood, in my town, is that they offend some visitors. The stench of overcrowded trailers, excrement, the white marquee above the cabs advertising, "Last ride, see ya, we'll be okay." The first time I saw these, I laughed. It's no wonder when a guest writer, an extremely vocal vegan, was visiting, I was so eager to point a truck out to her. "That's filth," she said. I said, "No," I told her, "that's what's for dinner."
I'm going to read two very short sections about one of the things that happened a lot on my trip, which is that I would come to small towns and stop in the local bars. My mom complained that there were a lot of bars in the book. There was more beer than bicycling, she said, which she saw as a problem. But I told her the only reason that's true is that's where the stories are, and I'm just there for the stories, Mom. Yeah, she didn't buy it either. This is in Wyoming. I don't know if I should broach this subject. I hope I don't offend anybody's sensibilities, but I am a heterosexual. The only reason I bring it up is there's a sort of subtext of gender confusion in these sections, so I wanted to make it clear beforehand. The hoodie that I refer to in this section is not like a cool Rocky hoodie. It's a thin hoodie that is made of nylon. When I first ordered it, it's a biking jersey with the hoodie, and I modeled it for my wife, and I asked her what she thought, and she had one word: girly. This is called Night at the Antelope Saloon. An abandoned house, its windows boarded and the wood stripped and sun-faded, sat among the high desert wheatgrass. 2 oak trees stood skeletal against gray clouds, and an old army green pickup rested peacefully in the yard. The house was 2 stories with large white beams stabilizing a roof over a large porch. I love that word, stories. What better way to describe the different levels of a house? Whoever had built the house built it solid. The roof didn't sag, the porch didn't lean. Once, I imagined, it had been a dream home. I could envision children playing in the yard, a tail-wagging golden retriever standing by the gate, the still young mother standing on the porch, one hand on her hip, the other shading her eyes. And a man with calloused hands and dirt beneath his nails greeting her, kissing her. In the upstairs window, which had no glass or screen and hadn't been boarded, I searched for ghosts. But all was silent, save for the rustling of the grass in the breeze. I rode through Eden and then into Farson, a small highway town with a gas station, a small cafe, and a bar, the aptly named Antelope Saloon. I stopped for chicken fried steak, which was delivered by a tall waitress wearing a bright, tight yellow t-shirt with the image of a blue teddy bear on the front and the words, "Your boyfriend snores." It was already evening and I needed a place to sleep. "Is it legal to camp in that park over there?" I asked her. "I don't know if it's legal," she said, "but I've seen people do it." "Well, is there a sheriff in town or someone I could ask?" The woman laughed. "There ain't no sheriff anywhere near here," she said. So I waited until just before dark and I pitched my tent beneath a tree in the park. The Antelope was just on the other side of the park, and I could hear the thumping bass of its music. So just past the fall of night, I walked to the bar, which was filled with loud music, cigarette smoke, voices, laughter, the smacking of pool balls. The crowd was mostly truckers and the road crew that was working on the highway project. A large, muscular man greeted me at the door. He was about 6'6" with a full brown beard and a back so tattooed he barely needed the orange tank top he was wearing. Clearly an outcast, I walked over and sat at the far end of the bar. It wasn't just that I had no tattoos or piercings. What concerned me most was that the bicycle jersey I was wearing had a hoodie. It occurred to me that a man with a hoodie in a place like this might expect to become fodder for bully practice. I sat at the end of the bar and tried to remain inconspicuous. Eventually, the bartender brought me a beer. I looked at her. She was about 6 feet tall with long hair and several ear, eyebrow, and nose piercings. There was something athletic about her, attractive, in a very she could hurt you kind of way. I thought I'd seen her before, but I couldn't imagine where. She shrugged. "I was a third-ranked junior middleweight boxer in the world for a while," she said. "Some people recognize me from that." And then I realized who she was. I'd read about her in Sports Illustrated and seen her on ESPN. There's a small controversy a few years before because Muhammad Ali's daughter had been anointed champ of the world even though she hadn't actually fought any ranked opponents. Debbie Foster was one of the women she refused to fight. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I'm retired now," she said. "We live out on a ranch. I like it here. It's quiet." "Do you miss boxing?" I asked. "No," she said. "I have a lot of great memories, but my focus is on working with the high school kids here, teaching them about health issues. I'm setting up a boxing program. I really like working with the kids." About her own boxing past, she spoke graciously, but I knew the questions I asked she had answered hundreds of times before. But when she spoke of the Farson youth, she spoke with passion. It was this she had the most to offer the world now. "Get much resistance about teaching boxing to girls here?" I asked. "Some," she said. "Not a lot." And it occurred to me, Debbie Foster probably didn't get a lot of resistance for anything. "I have to do everything after school and have to try not to interfere with other extracurricular stuff. People think boxing is brutal, but it teaches a kind of discipline and confidence that you can't get it any other way. But mostly," she emphasized, "everything's been positive. I just really like working with the kids." Suddenly there was a ruckus behind us. Raised voices. I turned to see two men argue. They'd been playing pool. The tension rose quickly in the bar. One of the men raised his pool cue, ready to swing. "Excuse me," said Foster. She calmly walked from behind the bar and stood between the two men. "Knock it off," she said, without raising her voice. Duly admonished, the two men lowered their pool cues and moved to opposite sides of the room. She picked up 2 empty bottles from a table and carried them back to the bar, dropping them in the trash on the way. "You want another?" she asked when she returned. And I said yes, because I didn't want to leave. Hoodie or no, I suddenly felt safe. Later, the man in the orange tank top came and sat at the bar. He was Foster's husband and had been her promoter during her boxing days. He himself had been an ultimate fighting champion. We sat and ate peanuts and told stories well into the night. I told them about my bicycle trip, and we talked about cycling, fighting, sports, and about quiet nights spent beneath western skies. When I looked around later, I realized that bar was nearly empty. It was closing time. We'd become friends, I guess, in that temporary way that people whose lives cross briefly forge bonds. Before I said goodnight and rose to leave, he nodded at me and said, "You must be tough to ride this far." Foster nodded. I imagined what I must look like next to them, me in my frilly bicycling shorts and jersey, and I had to laugh. Yeah, I thought, I'm the tough one here. This is like a page, so I rode south into the teeth of the wind. A very slow 8 miles into McAllister, the drizzle turned into rain. I pulled into a place called the Bear Claw and took a seat at the counter. The talk inside was all about weather. "I heard it's supposed to snow up to 10 inches in the mountains," said a man who spoke into his lunchtime beer. "Kind of bad day to be riding a bike, isn't it?" said another, standing at the bar looking at me. I agreed that it was. I ordered the largest cheeseburger I'd ever seen, and no flavor had been sacrificed for the size. The burger was topped with a thick slice of cheddar, nothing that had ever been singly wrapped in plastic, and an onion slice, tomato, and pickles. It was served with a huge mound of fries. I mention it here only because it was the single best hamburger I'd ever eaten. Just because McDonald's sells by the billions doesn't mean they couldn't learn a thing or two. A man walked in, the screen door banging behind him. He sat down beside me and nodded. "That your bike out there?" he said. I said that it was. "You might get wet," he said. It seemed a logical conclusion. I told him I was in no hurry, that I might just wait it out. "You might be here till July," he said. "That's the month we usually have summer. Last year it was on the 18th. I finished my burger and got up to use the restroom. 2 doors were labeled Pointer and Setter. I stood thinking, which one was I? Finally, I pushed open one door. The urinal inside told me I'd guessed right. "Turns out I'm a pointer," I said to the waitress when I returned. "We was taking bets," she said. You know, a lot of people are confused by those signs, but it's pretty obvious when you stop and think. Pointer, setter. Oh, I stopped and thought, she was right. Thank you.
I'm going to do one short thing, and then we're both going to read some short essays at the end. I shouldn't say essays, stories. You can call them whatever you want. People want to know what it's like to teach at the prison. One of our main jobs, what they do at the beginning is they take you to San Quentin or Folsom, and they do this every year, and they try to basically scare the hell out of you, which is good. We're there to observe other arts and corrections, arts classes, acting classes, writing classes. I'm trying to think what else. There's all kinds of different things, especially at San Quentin. But if you've ever been to San Quentin, you know how surreal it is. One of the things the prisoners do at San Quentin is they make Pruno. That's the homemade wine that they make in their cells. It takes anywhere from 30 to 40 days. They try to find any kind of sugar or sugar products and find yeast from some kind of food. They chew up the bread. They'll put it in a bag and with the sugar and water, and they have to heat it up and then cool it off for so long per day, and then they have to find a place to hide it. I was at San Quentin and all I got was this lousy t-shirt. I stand in the sally port to leave the prison and notice one of the many signs hanging on the old stone walls. Don't forget to buy your San Quentin t-shirt, today only. I remember my colleague insisting, bring me back a souvenir and don't be cheap about it. I'm standing in the parking lot, overlooking the San Francisco Bay, inhaling its salty breeze. This 432 acres is the most desired waterfront property. Even in this bust, lawmakers believe that developers would pay $2 billion. I approached the guard, the t-shirt vendor, and like everything here, it's surreal. There's a line. There are hoodies, various apparel, all for sale. Proceeds to help sustain San Quentin's Honor Guard program. I buy 2 identical t-shirts that replicate a Jack Daniels bottle and that read, San Quentin Prison, pen number 1, 1852, cell brewed Pruno. So I say to the guard, you're selling t-shirts that promote a crime within the prison to raise money for the Honor Guard? Yeah. Fair enough, I respond as I turn and enter a vehicle driven by an inmate who will escort us off grounds. I flash him the t-shirt and ask him if he wants one. No way, man. I'm living this hell. Sunshine handcuffs plexiglass scars. I asked the class to write down 5 things they've noticed today. There's nothing to notice here. Sure there is. We go to the yard and take to the walking track, parallel bars and men doing upside-down push-ups, 6-man handball, a thunder of voices and shifting eyes. What the hell are you guys doing? This is my class, man. Shit, you ain't got no class. There's bocce ball by the flex arm pull-up station and whistles. Hey, nice clipboards, girls. Careful what you say, we're writing all this stuff down. The tattooed neck yells back at the crowd. Walk up stumps and frisbee golf, walking the track. The old girl isn't out today, one says. No halter top. She doesn't bend at the knees on purpose, you know what I'm saying? I look around. Sun is out. Weather couldn't be better, but most of the men don't see this, and I'm at a loss for words. See these flowers, Sean says? They're closed at night, and in the morning they open. They stay open most of the day. I don't know what they're called, but I get to see them open and close every day. I had these same flowers by my front steps. The stems feel plastic, almost kind of fake. They break easily. We aren't supposed to touch them here. You know, one of the prisons they had me at, I could step into a corner of my cell and get a sliver of sunlight. It would hit me right here. And Sean cranes his neck and closes his eyes, right here on my face for about half an hour. That was the only sunlight I'd see. It's mental deprivation, and it works. Hell, most guards don't know what you're in for. They don't care. We were loaded on a 747 one winter, and we were standing on the tarmac without any jackets, a bunch of us. Just a t-shirt and orange pants, no socks, no shoes. They had our legs chained at the ankles so tight I was bleeding all over my feet, freezing. Scars are still here. He puts his leg onto the bench and pulls down his sock to show me. You know, I'm no killer or sicko. My whole stint that got me here lasted only 5 months. That's how long it took me to hit bottom. Hanging out with some terrible people I thought were my friends, and I backslid down the whole way that fast. Meth will eat you up. 15 years I'll be down for an addiction I couldn't shake, could have never imagined. When my daughter used to come visit me, I'd be behind these glass partitions. She'd tell me, "Daddy, roll down this window." I'd say, "I can't." She'd ask, "When are you coming home?" "Soon," I'd tell her. Now she wants to know the date. She'll be graduated by then. I walk both sides of this track, or fence, I should say. Vernon has taken the dirty dog home. On these common grounds, you hope you never run into each other again. I daydream that maybe I'll spot some of you, holding your children's hands, running your tattoo parlors, catfishing in your favorite holler holes, facing your demons the best you know how. I think maybe I played a part in some of this. This, a place any of us could have wound up in after a few misdirected decisions. Imagine a greeting from an aging mother who still relentlessly milks the Holsteins, imprisoned on her own farm, the smell of rotten silage, and the overwhelming burden of not having enough time. She, though, will be waiting at her threshold, doors wide open for you. Imagine the toy brontosaurus on laminate flooring, pointing its head to your child's bedroom. You will be welcomed again. And when you, Vernon, board that bus to the halfway house, keep your head high. With smart time, you'll have only 2 months to go. And I've been told never to get too close to any inmate, but I'm your teacher, and I'm afraid that's just not possible. So tonight, like most nights, I carry you home.
I'm going to read, this section is actually from the bicycling book as well, but it was published in Paddlefish, which Jim is the editor of. So, the encouragement of friendship carries a lot of weight in this business of rejection. So this is for Jim. Like a haggard ghost, a San Francisco journal. In a crowded street, the beggars all aim for me. It's somehow obvious to them I'm an outsider, and I never figure out how they know what marks me because I try to strike my best San Fran cool pose, the look straight ahead, got places to go, purposeful stride of the city. But try as I might, I can't refrain from star-crossed gazing at the buildings, the myriad of people in their strange clothes, the uninhibited way they stroll the streets. A woman in a cocktail dress with sunglasses and high black boots is singing out loud, and a man in a red leather jacket across the street calls out to her, "Sing it now, there you go." And after weeks riding through the small towns and wilderness of the West, I'm overwhelmed with the blending of crowds and traffic and noise and scents and signs, and of course that must be it. It must be obvious to people who know their territory so well, who is out of their element here, who might be persuaded to give $1 or $2 or some loose change, and so they approach me seeking cash for food, for coffee, for beer. A mangy, disheveled pigeon staggers across a grate on the sidewalk. It's a Friday in July. I'm sitting at a Starbucks on 4th Street and Mission in downtown San Francisco. The smell of coffee and the Van Morrison song drifting from the ceiling speakers masks the rumbling of the traffic outside. I'd flown to San Francisco 2 days earlier because my bicycle was gone, stolen from where it rested against a high school concession stand wall, just yards from where I'd covertly slept in the bleachers of a high school football field in a small town in Oregon. I'd been touring the West by bicycle for the past month and a half, retracing a ride taken 20 years before. Now, ingloriously, it was probably over. San Francisco is a city that engages the American imagination, and even for those who've never been there, before it represents a bohemian Mecca, a reputation informed by the observations recorded by those who've come before. Just a few blocks from where I sit, Jack Kerouac's Sal Paradise once stepped off a bus, and as Kerouac rode and on the road, wandered out like a haggard ghost into these same Frisco streets where long bleak streets with trolley wires were shrouded in fog and whiteness, and weird bums asked for dimes in the dawn. John Steinbeck in Travels with Charlie wrote that the city rose on her hills like a noble city in a happy dream. Mark Twain in Roughing It described decaying, smoke-grimed wooden houses and barren sand hills in a climate that was sometimes pleasanter when read about than personally experienced. Like the fogs that roll into the bay, the city is invented and reinvented daily by millions of eyes. Steinbeck saw happy dreams. I see desperate pigeons. My own memory holds a different city than what I see out the coffee shop window. 20 years earlier, I'd been met by my brother-in-law John on the Golden Gate Bridge, and he jogged along beside me as I pedaled across. I'd stayed with him and my sister Debbie in their small, clean apartment in nearby Mountain View, where there was a pool, and at night we ate at restaurants where the waitstaff sang and the food was served on square red plates. On a Saturday, we drove to the city and walked around Fisherman's Wharf. Its street musicians, artists, mimes, a man juggling sticks of fire while riding a unicycle. The city seemed jester-like then, in full makeup, smiling and telling boisterous jokes, making balloon animals for children. John and Debbie had been married just under a year at the time, and they were still mired in the throes of newlywed love, and we had zigged and zagged our way down Lombard Street, shopped Chinatown, drove up Polk Street, where a 6'4" woman with an Adam's apple wearing high heels and a blue dress walked haughtily across the street in front of us. And it seemed to me then the city was full of music and art and life, rich with possibility and romance. Then the next year on a spring break road trip with friends, we had stayed with a neurosurgeon in a large house with plate glass windows which overlooked the city and the bay. At night we'd sit on a large stone porch and look out at the city lights before us. So easy to fall for something that glimmers in the distance. So easy to be steered as a tourist to the comfortable edges on the front side of a polished veneer. Now, though, staying in a cheap downtown hotel, the city reveals to me a different, sadder side. It's as if the jester is now slumped in a tenement chair, wearing boxers and a white t-shirt, his face paint fading and peeling, a cigarette hanging from his bottom lip. I sip the last of my coffee down to the bitter grounds at the bottom of the cup. Outside, the pigeon stops as if to rest. It has red, bloodshot eyes, and its feathers are dingy and ruffled like a poor man's tattered jacket. It turns and glares back at me, and caught staring, I avert my eyes. Behind and above the pigeon, the theater across the street advertises a movie called The Devil's Rejects, the words moving like a prowling shark on a scrolling marquee. What determines our perceptions, the details our minds take in? At the age of 20, I was all hope and optimism, looking at a city that seemed so alive, jazz musicians on the corner, boats in the bay, young women everywhere. At 40, I noticed other things, the peeling of paint, tape on broken windows, an old man unshaven and toothless, his gray hair unkempt, sleeping his head resting against a doorway. How much of what I take in either then or now is accurate? For I can only see through these two eyes, and yet they are eyes tainted with preconceptions, prejudices, expectations. The man wakes, sees me watching him, scowls, and then takes a cup from the ground and holds it out for me. Here is where the truth gets tricky, where fiction intersects with non, because each moment of perception is an engagement with the imagination, so much riding on the words that I choose. I could say the man looks grumpy, he looks sad, looks content, looks lazy, looks like the result of a single nation's apathy. He looks dangerous, looks helpless, looks psychotic, looks a lot like you or me. San Francisco. From North Bend, it had taken only 3 hours by plane. By bicycle, it would have taken at least 8 delicious days. And I mourned all I wouldn't experience along the North Pacific coast, the lighthouses, the mist-shrouded redwood forests, those North California coastal towns, Fortuna, Arcata, Fort Bragg with their art galleries and cafes and coffee houses. I wouldn't see Wright's Beach or Point Reyes with its rocky coast and windswept oak trees. I imagined myself sipping hot tea from a perch on a cliff, gazing out into the fog-covered ocean, or sitting in a local pub at night listening to the stories of men whose faces had been weathered by lifetimes spent in the salty sea air. Instead, I was stranded in a hotel room alone, my money quickly running out, my bicycle gone. It's silly, I know, a 40-year-old man crying over a stolen bicycle. And yet, I had come this far, had ridden all the way from Colorado. By taking that airplane, it felt like I'd betrayed a 20-year dream. I walk outside and the pigeon waddles into an alley, turning to look back to make sure I don't follow. I stand surrounded by the crowded streets, the traffic and noise. A woman sitting on some steps holds out a cup and shakes it, loose, change rattling like dice in a Yahtzee game. From my left, a man approaches me. He's wearing a black tattered jacket, old worn green army pants. He wants to sell me a paper called The Street News. "Can you help me, man? I'm trying, really trying, you know," he says. I don't doubt it, but I give him no money. Less than a block later, I'm approached again. This man's wearing a purple t-shirt that says New York City. "I got a job interview," says the man. "If I could just get there. Could you give me a little money for the bus?" he says. I put my hand on my pockets. "I got nothing," I say. "It's cool, man," he says and moves off. I duck into a rock and roll art gallery with old black and white photographs of rock stars from the 60s, the Rolling Stones, Santana, Cream. There's an attractive, immaculately dressed woman sitting at a desk in the middle of the gallery, and she rises, assertively reaching out her hand to greet me. She leads me around, describing for me the photos I see. There's a sequence of photos in a single frame of Paul McCartney and others on their way to Mick and Bianca's wedding. "You know," says the woman, "for just $3,000, that's a pretty good deal." Probably true, but I laugh, which seems to offend her. She continues the tour. Jerry Garcia, Jefferson Starship. On the wall toward the back of the gallery, there's a photo of Ricky Lee Jones. "She's my favorite," I say, pointing. The woman turns up her nose at this. "She never did much for me," she says. "I was more into the Rolling Stones, Santana. My taste in rock and roll icons is clearly a disappointment," and she seems to understand. I am not a buyer. Her shoulders visibly slump. "Let me know if I can help you with anything else," she says, and then she returns to her desk. I walk back outside. 2 blocks later, I'm stopped by a woman with a clipboard. She's young, wears a white t-shirt with jeans. "You are under arrest," she says. At first, I believe her. "Really?" "Yes, for not smiling, not having fun, not girl watching." "Hey," I say, defending myself, "I was girl watching." "It's a bogus, trumped-up charge." She laughs and gives me a sticker that says San Francisco, and then she asks for money, for what I'm sure is a good cause. 2 blocks later, I walk past a small gathering of people near a fountain. They carry signs decrying the unfair labor treatment of a local hotel. A man at a podium rallies the crowd. "Are we going to let them get away with it?" he yells. "No," they respond. In the late afternoon, the sun moves lower in the sky, and the downtown is a collage of golden light and shadow. I move, turning onto a narrow side street, walk down a steep hill. There's a man sleeping against the side of a building, his sleeping bag bundled up tightly around him despite the 70-degree weather. He looks young, maybe in his early 20s. His unshaven face is covered in dry blood, a visible cut beneath his eye. Later, on a side street from a distance, I see a man sitting against a wall, rocking forward and back, holding up a cup in his tremoring hand and saying like a mantra, "Please, please, 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 please." I find the Master Motel the way I find a lot of things, by wandering around until finally there it is. I booked the Master online, chose it because it had budget rooms with shared baths. I check in and walk up the narrow, steep stairway. The motel has no air conditioning, and by the time I get to my floor, I'm covered in sweat. The room is small but clean, surprisingly stylish for the low cost, and incredibly well lit, no small thing for a compulsive reader like me. To top it off, there's a flower in a small glass vase on a tray resting on the bed. It feels good to have a space all my own in this city. A roof over my head. The days since my bike was stolen have worn on me. I was numb at first and then angry. Phone calls home have been tension-filled. I have to make a decision soon what to do next. I take out the phone book, call bike shops, finally find a shop with a touring bicycle my size. The bike sells for roughly $1,000. It's money I don't really have. I don't want to deal with the travel logistics or to replace all of the gear I needed, the tent, rain gear, panniers. I keep replaying in my head all that is gone, the clothes, cooking gear, food. Mostly I don't want to spend the money. What kind of man my age borrows money from his parents? The smart thing would be probably to quit, to just fly home. I turn on the TV, flip through channels, watch the local news. I'd lived without television for the past 2 months, and now I find it makes me jittery anxious. What de Tocqueville predicted about America nearly 165 years ago has proven true, that we'd develop pop culture tastes. Even he couldn't have predicted the influence of the television, how easily it would diminish the substance of art, and yet how significant it would be in shaping the culture. I turn it off, annoyed by it. San Francisco was just outside my door. I return to the street. As I walk, the change in my pocket jingles, and I use my hand to silence it. I decide to give it to the next person that asks, so that I won't have to worry about the noise attracting others. I don't walk far before I'm approached by a self-proclaimed street poet named Ricky Teague, selling homemade books of his collected poems. He is soft-spoken, shy, and I like him, could use his company. If I had the money, I'd ask him to join me for dinner. I read the poems and I think they're not bad. I've read worse. I don't have the money for the book, but I give him the change. It totals about 57 cents is all, but he seems pleased and he gives me a photocopied paper with 4 of his poems on it. I'm glad to have it, and I know I'll later wish I'd purchased the book, not out of any sense of charity, but for the genuine gift of his poetry. I walk on, making my way through the hilly and narrow streets, the stores now closing, the cable car tourist lines gone. Hey man, I hear from behind me, and when I turn, there's a man with a toothless grin walking toward me, and I start to walk faster, but he catches up to me, matches my stride. You want to join my martial arts school, man? He asks. It's a good tactic. A guy like me might just be looking for ways to defend himself about now. I stop, look at him. He's wearing a New York Yankees cap and an old jacket. He holds a can of beer in a brown sack, and I can smell the sour scent of the alcohol. Martial arts school? I say. Yeah, man, and not normal like the movie stuff either, but real martial arts. This is ninja martial arts. You work with me, you will have all power. I can help you overcome any obstacles. A ninja school? I say. Yeah, this is the real deal, bro, he says. We come to an intersection just as the lights change and I'm stuck on the corner with him. The truth is, it's the best conversation I've had all day. I know where I have to be. I can teach you to run up the sides of that wall, he says. Can you run up the side of that wall, I say? He feigns offense. Of course, how am I going to teach you if I can't do it myself? I point to a nearby building. Let's see it, I say. Well, I'm not going to do that right now, he says. You want to help me out, man? I just need some money so I can start my school right here. Look, I say, I have no change at all. Change? Change? Do I look like a change kind of guy to you? Bills, man, no change. Change, he says with disgust. I had no idea. I thought I looked better than that. Change, he said, shaking his head. Things must be worse than I thought. The light turns and I walk across the street. He doesn't follow, and as the distance between us grows, I can still hear the word change echoing through the city. I decide then not to buy the bike. Joan will be here to join me in 2 days, and I'll fly back to Lincoln with her. I won't finish the trip. It'll be okay. The stolen bicycle is not a tragedy after all. It's a Pee Wee Herman movie. Later that night in the dark, I walk by a group of college kids. One of them has a large camcorder on a tripod with a bright light. The rest have push brooms. The camcorder is pointing toward a man with a clapboard sign that says, Market Street needs cleaning. Less than a block from the Pleas for a Cleaner City, I notice a sign on the Bank of America window that says, No camping. Over the last 2 months, I've slept in organized campgrounds and motels, but also I have sneaked into city parks, school grounds, hidden in forests on the outskirts of towns. There are a lot of places in America where it's illegal for a man to sleep. If I dwell on these beggars in the street, it's perhaps because they are the only ones who interact with me at all. Most people stare straight ahead, no eye contact. The homeless problem in San Francisco is perhaps the worst in all of America's cities. Estimates put the number at between 4,000 and 6,000 people. And taken to the account who stay in shelters and clinics, the number rises near 14,000, all in a city where the average apartment rents for $1,800 a month, with a roughly 1% availability. It's better, perhaps, that the problem is visible and not swept under the carpet, as in some places. I think about the homeless sweeps I've read about in Gallup, New Mexico, or New York, Denver, Atlanta, where the downtrodden are moved away from public view lest they offend sensibilities. San Francisco is a city with an incredible sense of tolerance, one of its great strengths. Of course, tolerance can be indifference in disguise. I think of the last presidential debates, all the talk of the wealthy, the middle class, but no real discussion of the burgeoning poverty. When did the plight of the poor stop being part of the political discussion? Is it a shortening of our attention span? The idea that old issues don't sell, aren't fresh, so we obsess on a runaway bride or a missing debutante on a Caribbean junket? It's not the people living on the streets that are disturbing so much as the pretense that the rest of us aren't affected by the conditions we create. The next day I'm in a crowd at the busy crosswalk at Market and Fourth. A skinny black man with yellow teeth approaches selling street news. The man standing next to me, an old man in a blue laborer's jumpsuit, shakes his head in disgust. Lazy, he says to me, these people, young people, they don't want to work. I shrug, don't respond. I've been in San Francisco downtown for less than a day. What do I know about it? That night in my hotel room, I called Joan earlier than usual. Guess what, she says, and the news is good. My bicycle's been recovered by the police, found lying in a ditch beneath a row of bushes not far from where I'd slept the night it was stolen. The camera and journals are safe in the handlebar bag. All that's missing forever is a bag of Bing cherries and 2 power bars. I'll have to make up a lot of time and ground, and the original route will be altered, but I just might finish the trip after all. Months later, and I'm watching the news from the comfort of my home when the tragic circumstances of Hurricane Katrina unfold. As the pieces of the story slowly come to light, it's clear that the true tragedy is not the emergency itself, but the truth that it reveals. The reporter, his voice cracking, says over and over how much the conditions resemble the third world. He seems surprised by this. He shouldn't be. Okay, thank you.
I've got a short story. It's nonfiction that I want to read for you. I'm working on a book, and Brent Spencer stole my title. I want to call it "Are We Not Men?" I'll get to that in a second. I want to read one more poem for you. This is called Composition 103, No Shoes Required. And it has a epigraph from Ted Kooser. The green shell of his backpack makes him lean into wave after wave of responsibility. My students, most of whom have never bought a book on their own, lean eagerly on chairs toward the screen, their eyes showing all their white. They like DVDs more than books, more than poems. One says, I can relate. I'm so totally more focused than when I read a book. One student is shoeless, toes curled under. I imagine him hanging upside down, sleeping in a tree. A young woman in class is wearing her Victoria's Secret I Love Pink pajama bottoms and cougar print slippers. She looks cold, her hoodie pulled tight around her head. The cowboy boots in class are tied, and the cowboy has a holster for his BlackBerry, thumbs slowly evolving into fingers as he texts his way on horseback into this victorious sunset. The only thing missing is a pink dress shirt tucked into jeans pulled up too high, the belt buckle big and bronze. There's a G-string arriving late, bending now in front of the class to pick up whatever it is she's dropped. There's always a G-string, the batting of eyelashes, and what am I if I don't look? I preach immersion, teach show, don't tell, write what you know well. A student in front of class keeps raising his hand. I pause the DVD. Are we supposed to be taking notes on this? I stop the DVD and announce a pop quiz. On the board I write, during the 100 Years' War, Italy and Greece battled over control of various Mediterranean islands. B. France's territorial integrity was defended by a young mystic named Joan of Arc. Muslims and Christians clashed over control of Europe. Or professors surrendered control of the classroom, finally recognizing the unalienable right of students to text 24 hours a day, 7 days a week as a natural right based on a loose construction of Thomas Jefferson's Pursuit of Happiness Clause in the Declaration of Independence, which then caused a dramatic decline in the production and sale of hooded sweatshirts. I had some help when I was writing this with another professor. The students are cold. Some stare blankly. Some scratch at the backs of their hands. One keeps snapping her gum and finally breaks the silence. Is this supposed to be some kind of joke? History? I didn't sign up for that. So here's one of about 15 some nonfiction pieces I've been working on for a few years. And the great thing about, I understand what it's like to be rejected from a magazine. We get about 2,000 submissions in about a 4 to 5 month period, and we publish 30 of them. I don't know what those percentages are, but I know it's not a lot. The week this was rejected by the Prairie Schooner, I got it accepted by the Patterson Literary Review. In my rejection letter, actually, okay, this is a story about when I learned about sex. In the rejection letter it says, when we had all read the essay, our consensus was that it stopped pretty much before it had begun. The details were great and effective, but we wanted a larger context for them. Hard. Skate word was where we learned a French kiss, where we learned to chew, spit, and swallow. We wanted to be men at work, but wore more specifically on Friday and Saturday nights, boys with boners. Michael Jackson was the king of pop, and we worshipped him. We could reenact the whole 14-minute Thriller video, zombies and all. We proudly wore our white sequined gloves on our right hands until Scott Lumbar, a second-year 10th grader, picked us up one after another by our belt loops and pinned us to the lockers for wearing them. We owned but hid our Madonna vinyl. Boy George was singing Karma Chameleon, and I don't think any of us really knew what he was singing about, but we loved it. We sang it loud along with Duran Duran, Prince, Morris Day, and The Cure. Frankie said to relax, not to do it, but we didn't listen. We had our Jungle Love, our OEOEO, our Sims wheels, jump bars, dance stops, and vocal 1.5 revs landing backwards on the same foot. On the skating rink, we could cut it up. Skate World advertised family fun, but after the couple skate, during the 2-song blackout craze, we lined the walls with girls we were going with or girls we were going out with. Our skates made us half a foot taller as we pushed in close, palm against palm, lilacs and the sweet smell of sweat for the first time. We rolled our tongues and opened our mouths over hard veins on necks. There was the fire and awkwardness of faces and kisses colliding. Words whispered to us, let's try something new. No. Here. Yes. Our shaking hands busily trying to find treasures we couldn't make out in the dark, our bodies quivering for the occasion. When the lights blasted back on, we looked around for the right words to say, but never at eye level. Donnie Ansel might jump up and backskate his way to the restroom, or he'd jump with both wheels up on the carpet, retrieve his skate case first so he could change his shirt in the men's room. This was hip. We would bring half a drawer of clothes with us to swap or lose forever. In the restroom, we would drown ourselves in Polo cologne and talk of our new adventures. During the week, we would dream and wait impatiently to return. What happened to your purple and pink Izod I bought for you the other day? My mother would ask. Donnie Ansel's borrowing it. Who the hell is Donnie Ansel? Ansel, Mom. Donnie Ansel, you're always getting my friends' names wrong. For a while this worked. What I didn't want my mom to ask was too many questions. More than likely she would pick me up from Skate World the following week and I'd make sure I got the purple and pink Izod back. The Copenhagen Marble Reds and the jar of vodka I'd swiped from my dad were gone. This went on for a good 2 years. The clothing, tobacco, occasional booze, and any other material we thought might make us look good to the opposite sex. Jimmy, where's my Prince tape? My dad asked in a fever one day. The one with that red Corvette song on it. And I knew what would come next, which always came after my father searched frantically for a song he wanted to hear. He would try to sing it himself. It was a Saturday night, I guess it makes it alright. And you said, what have I got to lose? And honey, I said, little red Corvette, I'm And he held on to the last note while wanking out an imaginary guitar solo in my bedroom. After he came to, he looked at me squarely. Have you seen it? I gave it to Kelly Hillside. Kelly who? Hillside. A girl, right. Okay then. My father scratched his shoulders. Makes sense. Get it back. I want it back. Kelly is a guy. What? Get my damn tape back. You hear me? And he boogied his way out of my room. Down the hall, I could still hear him. Move over, baby. Give me the keys. I'm gonna try to tame your little red love machine. Uh-huh. And another thing. He stormed back into my room to make his point. Quit stealing my vodka and putting water in the bottle. You hear me? You think I can't taste that? Sexuality was never really an issue in my house growing up. And what I mean is that I never felt uncomfortable talking about it or reading about it in one of my father's penthouse magazines he kept underneath his bed. My father walking around with his blue cotton paisley robe, undershirt, and shortless in the morning was as predictable as my mother's hamburger surprise on Tuesday bowling nights. Apparently, my mother gave me the birds and bees talk, although I don't remember. She does and has since told me I didn't have a lot of questions. Perhaps that is because as an only child, I spent weeks in the summer at my cousin's house glued to the Playboy channel while my aunt and her friends played cribbage and smoked out of a bong. It was the late 70s, early 80s, and everyone was trying hard to hold on to peace and love. Every once in a while, an adult would holler out to the living room, "You boys okay in there?" We were speechless, eyes fixated on the television, and that seemed to suit just everyone fine. Once I asked my cousin how babies were made. This must have come before my talk with my mother. I remember it vividly. We were in my mother's kitchen, likely taking out the trash or scrounging for another turkey leg. My youngest cousin pointed to the linoleum floor littered with paisley and pansies and said, "It's simple. If a woman was to walk in here and you were to pee on the floor at the same time she was in here, that would get her pregnant." For years I had a phobia about peeing in public or any building where women might be. "What's the matter, Jimmy? You gotta go?" my father would ask. No. I would scream as I crossed my legs, searching frantically and fearfully for females. It was Skate World and the mysterious question box in 6th grade mandatory sex education class where I learned the truth. We all made fun of Charlie Ferguson when he put his anonymous question in the box. "Can I still have a kid with only one nut?" Mr. Palmy read it out loud to the class like he read every question, but he couldn't even keep a straight face. As we gawked and bellowed and rolled around the room, it was Charlie Ferguson who didn't budge from his seat, who sat still as a mannequin, engulfed in fear. When Mr. Palmy got a hold of himself and us, he said firmly, yes, you can still father a child. And Charlie Ferguson, he smiled. And maybe that was the beginning, when we realized the only man in the room wasn't our teacher, rather it was the kid who had the ball to ask the bigger question. And Skate World is where we asked and explored and tried to discover for ourselves what love, lust, or rather infatuation was made of. We donned our tightly jeans and Vans, collar stiff and up. We spiked our hair and decorated our clothing with safety pins. This is where weird science began, forever looking up to the women we adored. And part of this place we can never give up. We went from breakdancing, skates, and boards to college and children of our own. Our audience has grown smaller though, but some of us still aren't afraid to get down on the linoleum and backspin. No one is clapping though. Our wives simply lower their heads and blush, while our children join us on the ground yelling, "Spin me, Daddy. Spin me like that." Thanks, Neil. Thank you, guys.